Hello everybody and welcome to Mrs. G's Storytime. We are reading Secret at Pheasant Cottage by Patricia Sanjan with permission of Moody Publishing Company. And we're reading chapter 15, Grandpa Arrives in Spain. Grandpa had never been out of England before, and I felt that anything might happen to him on his way in Spain, so we all went down to the market square much too early to meet him as he got off the bus. At long last, it swept around the corner and stopped in front of us. There was Grandpa in his black Sunday suit and a big hat, peering short-sightedly into the crowd in every direction except the right one. He looked very English and out of place in Spain. I was in his arms before he'd even seen me, and Lola and the children were pressing around us, smiling, shaking hands, escorting him down the street that led to the inn, all speaking Spanish at once. Grandpa followed, smiling and nodding and not understanding a word. Only when he was comfortably seated in the patio under the vine did we really greet each other. He had taken off his hat and coat and washed up, and Lola had brought him a nice cold drink. He was feeling better and took a good look around. "It's very warm here, isn't it, Lucy?" he remarked, "and I must say you're looking well, though perhaps a little thinner. And how brown you are. And how is your poor father?" I sat down beside him and talked about Daddy, his kindness, his goodness, his courage, how he had nearly given his life for Conchita. And Grandpa sat watching me, his blue eyes rather troubled and anxious, but he did not interrupt me until I paused for breath. "Your Gran, Lucy, is quite well, but she finds it hard to relax when you're not there, and she's counting the days until you come home." "Well, I won't be long," I replied. "Dad's getting better, and it's not long till school. Tell me about home, Grandpa. How's the garden? How's Shadow?" He chatted on while I sat on the rug at his feet. I had not realized how much I'd missed home, because there had been so much to think about, and now it was all coming back. I thought of all the sights and sounds around Pheasant Cottage, and Spain suddenly seemed very parched and hot. Pepito and Pedro kept peeking through a crack in the door and being chased away by Lola, coming back again. But I hardly noticed them. Grandpa did, though, and he called them in. He opened up his case and presented them with a big bag of mixed sweets. They thanked him joyfully, and we could hear them for a long time talking excitedly in the kitchen. Then Lola came in with lunch and insisted that Grandpa and I eat alone together that first day. He pecked rather doubtfully at the spicy, oily food, but I ate an enormous meal and thoroughly enjoyed myself. After lunch, Grandpa had a long sleep, for he said he had not slept a wink in his noisy London hotel room, and he was feeling the heat. At 5, we sat out and walked up to the hospital almost in silence. Grandpa was obviously nervous and kept clearing his throat and mopping his brow. I was quiet because I was approaching the great moment of my life. Daddy and Grandpa were going to meet. I hoped the old nun wouldn't take us up to the ward, for I wanted to take Grandpa myself, and to my relief she wasn't there. The doorkeeper let us in and nodded to the stairs. Grandpa was walking very slowly now, almost as though he was afraid. But I just could not wait. I ran ahead and slipped into the room without knocking and ran to my father. "He's coming, Daddy," I announced. "Grandpa's coming up the stairs now. Are you ready?" Grandpa's head came cautiously round the door, and I wondered for a moment what sort of monster he expected to see. But at the sight of my father, so pale and weak, propped against pillows, his expression changed suddenly to one of great concern and compassion. He hurried across the room, both hands outstretched. "Mr. Martin," he cried, "how very, very sorry I am to see you like this. Lucy has been telling me about your, great courage in saving that child." He clasped Daddy's free hand, and Daddy was smiling his gentle, pleased smile, not the twisty one that meant he was making fun of someone. It was all going really well. "Pull up that chair, Mr. Ferguson," said my father. "I can't talk too much, get a bit breathless, but it's good to see you. Lucy, wait downstairs. I want to talk to your Grandpa. Come back and say goodbye later." I trotted off and wandered around the old walled garden, which smelled of thyme and lemon verema. I felt very happy because everything was coming right. Daddy and I would soon go home together, and he would get better at Pheasant Cottage, where it was cool and green. He would sit and write his books in the garden, and I would take him cups of coffee. And next summer we'd come back to Spain to visit Lola, Rosita, and the children, and the sea, and the fishing boats, and the old woman. Lucy, your father's waiting to say goodbye. Grandpa was standing on the steps, and I ran to him joyfully. Did you like him, Grandpa? I asked. I told you he was a good man, didn't I? Yes, yes, Lucy. He's a good, brave man. Go to him now and don't stay long. He's very tired. I obeyed, but wondered why Grandpa seemed so distressed, and why were there tears in his eyes. Perhaps my father would tell me. I slipped into his room and hesitated. He lay so still, and his face was a strange color. Lucy, darling, come here. He managed to lift his arm and put it around me. I wish I could explain, but I've been talking too long. I'll have to just tell you. I want you to go home with Grandpa tomorrow. You can't stay here alone, but I shall miss you. Hasn't it been a lovely holiday? My face flushed red. Leave him alone? It was impossible. I'd stay with Lola and visit him every day and pack for him when he came home. He pressed my hand. Lucy, darling, I'm too tired to argue, he said. It's just got to be. Come in the morning and say goodbye. I'll explain then. And Lucy, never, never hate. What a stupid waste of time it all was, and what a good old man he is. There was nothing more to be said, and he kissed me and closed his eyes. I leaned against him for a moment or two, gulping back my tears, and then slipped away. As I came downstairs, I could see Grandpa sitting on the bench in the hall waiting for me, but he did not hear my footsteps, for he was thinking hard with his head bowed. He looked like such a sad old man. I suddenly felt afraid. What had gone wrong? They had met and liked each other, and Daddy would get better and come home. I could put my hand softly on Grandpa's shoulder, and he jumped. Grandpa, I whispered tearfully, couldn't I wait until he's better? He'll need someone to carry his suitcase when he comes home. He's not allowed to carry anything heavy. You must do what he says, Lucy, said Grandpa. His voice was sorrowful. He told me in his telegram to book return seats. It's all for the best, my dear, but he'll find it hard to say goodbye in the morning, so you must help him by being brave and obedient. We walked home almost in silence, and I left him resting and went into the kitchen to tell Lola and Rosita that I had to go home. Lola clasped me in her arms and burst into tears. Rosita wrung her hands, and the little boys both cried together. We wiped our eyes and fried potatoes and had a party. Uncle played the guitar, Rosita danced, and we all sang. Grandpa was too tired to come, so we took him his supper on a tray, and he was still feeling miserable. Grandpa, I whispered, what's the matter? Why are you so sad? He'll come soon, won't he? He can come to the cottage, can't he? You did like him, didn't you, Grandpa? Oh, yes, oh dear, yes, said Grandpa, very upset. But what a lot of time we wasted, Lucy, when we won't forgive. I've been sitting here thinking. I wasn't much good at book learning, and your Gran would say it's a lot better than I could, but it seems to me that every hour when we won't forgive and love is an hour of life wasted. And to think of all those years when we could have done so much for him. But you can do it now, Grandpa, I insisted. We'll all do lots for him when he comes home. And do you think, Grandpa, that when he comes we could go to the plane and meet him, you and me? He shouldn't carry his suitcase himself, you know. But Grandpa only said, please, God, we'll do all we can for him, my dear, and went sadly to bed. I did the same, but not to sleep, for this was the last night I would watch the moonlight on my white wall, or hear the break of the small waves on the beach, or the muffled noises of the street in front of the inn, the footsteps, the chattering, the strumming of guitars from the cafes, all the sounds of Spain that I had come to know so well. I had spent my last happy evening with Rosita and her family, and tomorrow I would pay my last visit to the hospital. I buried my face in the pillow and felt miserable, but soon fell asleep. Then I woke to my last sunny morning in Spain. I had a lot to do before we left in the afternoon. I had to pack all my Spanish treasures and visit my father and say goodbye to the old woman and have a farewell dinner with the family. I went with Rosita to fetch bread for the last time, but we kept wiping our eyes and sniffling, so it wasn't a very cheerful trip. We had special permission to visit my father in the morning, me first and Grandpa later, but I did not hurry on my way there. I walked slowly because I was dreading leaving him. I knew it was too late to change anything, and the best way to help him was to obey as cheerfully as possible. He had just had his morning wash and shave, and he looked fresher and brighter than he had the evening before. The room faced east and was full of sunshine, and a pleasant-looking young nun was bringing him a drink. I felt a bit more cheerful as I drew up the chair and leaned against the pillows. "Daddy," I began, "I do wish I didn't have to leave you. Who'll visit you and look after you when I'm gone?" "Lola will visit me," he replied, "and I couldn't be better looked after anywhere. These nuns are wonderful, and that old one who comes in the afternoon tells me she goes to the chapel and prays for me every day, and I'm sure you'd approve of that." I turned to see if he was laughing, but his expression was quite serious and rather sad. "That's two of us then, Daddy," I said, "because I do too." "Then keep right on, Lucita," he said gently, and we were silent for a few moments. He seemed tired with talking, so I talked instead. I told him all my wonderful plans for when he came home, and described the summer house where he could sit and write with the Clements, and the honeysuckle climbing in at the window, and the robin who flew in and out of the spare bedroom that would be his. Grandpa has said so. "So you see, they're longing for you to come," I finished. "You won't be long, will you?" "I should love to come," he said, "only I can't be quite sure when. But remember, whatever happens in the future, nothing can ever take away this holiday. It's been the happiest time for me since your mother died. You've been such a perfect little companion, Lucy, and it's been like having her all over again. She didn't seem much older than you when I married her. You're so alike." "It's been a lovely holiday," I whispered because my lips were trembling. But it's been rather a sad ending, hasn't it?" He held me as close as he could. "Not really," he said. "In fact, sometimes I think it's the happiest ending possible. You see, I've often felt sad about those years when we could have been together, and all my own stupid fault. So I'm glad I could give another little girl back to her parents. I often woke in the night and feel so thankful that I got there just in time. And if I hadn't been ill, I'd never have known your grandfather. It's all come right, Lucy. Such a happy ending." He was breathless with too much talking, and the young nun, who had been waiting outside, came over and put one hand gently on my shoulder and the other on my father's wrist. I gave him a last kiss, and she led me away. But at the door I turned and smiled through my tears. "It was a lovely holiday," I said in a voice that was trembling slightly. "Thank you, Daddy. Thank you so much. And thank you too, Lucy. Thank you so, so much," he whispered. And then the door was closed softly behind me, and I had said goodbye. I did not want to go straight back to the house. Why did I have to leave him just when he needed me so much to visit him, to fetch things, and to pack his suitcase when he got better? Almost without knowing it, my feet carried me across the marketplace toward the vineyards and the olive trees. Each time I'd gone there, I'd felt comfort, and now I needed it more than ever. The grape harvest had begun, and my old woman was there among the vines, working hard, her little granddaughter beside her. There were other people there, too, and they stared curiously at me as I slipped towards her in the bushes. And when she saw me, she threw up her arms in delight and pressed a grape into my mouth. And then she looked at me very closely and knew that I was in trouble. She squatted on the warm soil by her loaded basket and drew me down beside her. The vines became a private shelter around us, and I tried to tell my sad story. My father, I explained, was still in the hospital, pointing to the sky. I said I was going to England in Avalon. I'd come to say adios. My eyes filled with tears again. She understood at once and murmured her sympathy. Some of the words she spoke back to me I could understand. "Jesus with me, Jesus with you, Jesus with your father." Of course I understood. In my sadness, I'd forgotten. I wasn't leaving Daddy alone. I was leaving him with Jesus, who loved him very much and who so far had made everything come right and answered my prayers. He'd been there in the quiet ward, and even if my father didn't know much about him, he knew all about my father. And the old nun was praying for him, and I too, and my grandfather liked him. All was well. I picked 2 vine leaves to press in the memory of that moment. I kissed the old woman and left her sadly. She looked as if she was calling down heaven's blessings on my head. And then I remembered something that made me clap my hands softly and skip down the dirt road. I was going home to Gran and Shadow. Tomorrow we'll be reading chapter 16, All Bright in Front. I love you, I'm praying for you, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.